All right. So, all right. My name's Rob Milne. I've born and bred in Johannesburg for the last 66 years, and it always comes to mind. I ask people, if you ask anyone why do they stay in Johannesburg, and the typical answer is, well, I stayed there because wherever you go out of Johannesburg, it's better. And but I found out that actually Johannesburg is a very, very interesting place. And within a radius of 18 kilometers yesterday, I mean, I could have run any number of tours for any number of hours. And I had to really cut back. And even though I'd done most of the photography yesterday, just in 3 hours for this presentation. So that's the kind of potential we have. So my father always used to drag me off to Anglo-Boer War blockhouses and forts, and from the age of 5 years old. And from then on, the bug bit. I got very interested in the Anglo-Boer War, and of course archaeology and history, and also geology. And in fact, I always wanted to become a geologist. But in those days, your father decided what you would do. So he decided I would be an accountant, which was actually quite a bit of help during the lockdown because I had to create my own accounting bookkeeping business overnight to survive. And I managed to do that. So, yeah, but I think we've all suffered very greatly. And I'm here to help and to maybe point out new ways. We are a community. And when you think that tourist guides have probably been the hardest hit out of everybody in this lockdown, we have to be there for each other. And you'll see during the course of my presentation that I'm going to say, well, I need Howard for this and I need Terry for that and he needs me for this. So guys, let's help each other. We all are protective about our turf and our tours, and we all like to keep something back. But I think, we all have different abilities and we have different disciplines. So let's try and share those as much as possible. And I'll conclude with that. So I think that's more or less me at the moment. I never slow down, I never stop, and I never stop learning and creating new routes and new ideas and new research. And we're going to open up with a very significant discovery, which I made during lockdown, right at Lanseria International Airport. And, when one thinks, how many ancient monoliths do we have in this country, number one? How many do we have in Gauteng? Very few. And here we have one at Lanseria International Airport that is incredibly old, and it's a very, very ancient site. So Maria Louise, if you'd like to show us the video, this huge upright stone, and in front of it to the north, there's a hollowed out rock, and beneath it, there's a rock with engravings on it. So you can see 4 cupule engravings. The site is so overgrown, and to clear the site, we won't really know what exactly is there. It's very complex, and I'll be coming back to it a little bit later. But I'm actually going to start the tour from the front door of the estate where I live, and just to see what is right in front of your eyes that people wouldn't normally notice. Okay, so that's Gateside Manor. It's in Broad Acres, very close to Dainfern and very close to Steyn City. And it's a lovely gate, and on the right-hand side there's some beautiful trim bushes. So if we hone in on the bushes, you'll see a number of rocks there, which are ornamental, and they've been gathered from the Jukskei River to fill in and make a nice kind of rock garden. And if we take a closer look at those, we'll see that's kind of sideways, but it's okay. It still works. This is an incredible collection of over 1 million-year-old hand axes made, and only worked on the one side. So they're unifaced rather than bifaced. So it's a magnificent collection of hand axes. And there's probably about 400 there. And one of the things I haven't been able to do is walk along the Jukskei River close by near Chartwell and see where this incredibly rich Stone Age manufacturing site was. But I'll get there. So we'll see one up close now. There you can see the various facets. And this is a beautiful hand axe. And as I say, it's probably 1.1 million years old. And there we just drive past it every day. And if we don't have eyes that are sensitive to all sorts of things, and I'm talking about stars and trees and rocks and flowers, then we miss a lot that's really on our doorstep. And the next one that I'm going to show you is just across from our gate. There was a vacant veld. And that's looking through the bars into the veld, which is now like a doggy park. And you'll see some trees on the right foreground. And we'll just hone in onto that. Okay, and you'll see there's like a pile of earth there. Not a very good photo. It wasn't taken in the right light yesterday. But that big pile of dirt is actually a semicircle, and it's part of an Iron Age Kraal, which is probably 14th, 15th century. And somehow that's escaped development when they built these various estates and complexes. So I'd like to try and preserve that. And of course, I've informed the owners, so they're not likely to build there. But in fact, in terms of legislation, you would actually need an environmental impact study because there are known historical ruins on that site. So now this is Cedar Road. You've heard of Cedar Road. Some of you have traveled along it and you probably haven't noticed anything significant about it. So this is a sluit and it's next to Chartwell Veterinary Clinic. My estate is on the right-hand side across the road. And sometimes walking my dogs over to get their vaccinations. I walk along the sluit and you have no idea how many beautiful smoky quartz and amethysts and amethyst crystals that I find in and around this sluit. We're in a geological area called pegmatites amongst the granites, and that is a very rich source of these fabulous crystals. And I've got quite a collection at home, and I give them away a lot as well. There's so many just lying around. So that's just a little introduction into Cedar Road. And I'm going to take you down Cedar Road now towards Fourways. Okay, so as we travel towards Fourways, there's a new hospital, Fourways Life Clinic on the right. Just before you get there, there's a unique geological feature called a tor. Okay, now a tor is an outcrop, in this case granite. Okay, so it's a large freestanding rock outcrop that is quite unique. And we have 3 and 4 ways. This view actually is taken from an estate. It's actually on the One Golf Estate, and the other side of the road, the other side in the background, if you had to go beyond that tree, is Cedar Road. So you can just see the top of it from Cedar Road. But there's another 2 very interesting tors in the area, and if you triangulate them on a map, you actually find that it's triangulated one of the wealthiest areas in the whole of South Africa. What a coincidence. And we'll see now where this particular one is on Cedar Road. So there's a nice little map, and you'll see 2 narrations of Cedar Road there. And there's a little pin just where, yeah, there we are. So that's where the one tor is. And opposite it, a little bit further down the road, is the hospital. So a lot of you might have traveled this road every day for years, and you've never noticed it. So this is right under our noses. We're going to go and see the next one, which is Northcott Koppies. And you can see very beautiful. It's a nature reserve now, and it's open, I think, every second Sunday of the month, and one can wander around there. And you know, I've never actually had time to do that, because this photo is taken from the Kingfisher Park, which is a lovely doggy park, and I'm going to take you into the park and show you a bit about it. But this koppie, you can see, was actually mined for its beautiful granite. You might see in the middle distance there, there's quite a sharp, flat surface. There we go. So that was actually a mine, but I've never really had time to pop by there on a Sunday when it's open, but it's really lovely. So now we look at a mini tour. Okay, this is Kingfisher Park, and you'll see all the red things that you can't do. There's only one green thing that you can do. But don't worry, it gets better. When I take you to Lone Hill, you'll see we can do 3 green things. So there's just ours and, you know, the permissions and everything. It's actually a very lovely little park. And it's absolutely nice if you're on a day tour, just to stop off there and have a picnic lunch. There's swings for the children. There's lovely trees, and there's a skateboard park. It's a really nice, peaceful place. And what I like most about it is everybody in the area goes and walks their dogs there. So it's so pleasant. I just go down to the local spa, and they produce the most legendary toasted bacon and egg sandwiches. And I take my cup of coffee and I sit on the park bench and I look at this amazing variety of dogs that go walking past me with their owners. And I chuckle to myself because, you know, they always say that owners look like their dogs, or vice versa. So now we'll show you the mini tour on the park. There we go, and there's a guard sitting on the top, the first I've ever seen. And there's some of there's a lovely slide there. You can see a little child playing. In fact, there was a family having a picnic at the table yesterday at lunchtime when I was taking these photographs. And we find a lot of things if we just look under our feet as we walk around this tour, and you'll see in the next photo there, that looks like a kind of a rim or circle. That's in fact an Iron Age grindstone. What I did, because it was getting damaged, as you can see, by the skateboard enthusiasts, they were using this as a kind of turning place, is I just put a whole lot of pebbles in it just to preserve it, because it really is beautiful. And a lot of those little pebbles that you see there are in fact late Stone Age tools, which were typically made out of the quartz that you find in the area. There's hundreds and hundreds of them. And then we'll walk around the park a little more. And there you see, this is the south side of the park, lovely bank. And if you look very closely here, again with the pegmatites, you pick up the most beautiful amethysts. And you can even find sapphires in the pegmatites. And I found myself a tiny little one. It's probably the size of a pinhead. You have to have very sharp eyes to see that. But you can't believe the crystals, the lovely amethyst crystals that I found just on this path. And this I took yesterday. And you'll see in the next slide something interesting. Aha, there's an amethyst right in the center there. Not very high quality. You find better ones, but this is just lying there. I mean, you can see my footprint next to it. So what a lovely place to take your tourists, talk about geology. But I need Howard Geach there to teach me a lot more and just make it a lot more interesting. So a nice place to take people. Okay, so we then move on, and this is Lone Hill. which is now a really upmarket housing area. And you have this lovely tor there. And it's got a balancing rock on it that you can see from the east side. And we'll see that now. This is just the things that you can do there before we have a look at this balancing rock. So here you can do three things. You can use binoculars, you can walk, and you can take photographs. But you can't have firearms or ride a bicycle or even take your dog there. But it's good. You know, there's a lot that's very interesting here. Professor Rob Milne did an excavation of an Iron Age furnace. And I'm not sure where that is, but we'll find that. Hopefully it's still being preserved. And so we next go to the balancing rock. Now that's quite significant. The focus is not too good because my camera decided that the tree in the foreground was a little bit more important to focus on. But during the Anglo-Boer War, the Boer commandos had a belief that if they managed to push this stone off that outcrop, then the British would leave the Transvaal. Now, what they should have done is spend more time in target practice and practicing shooting Englishmen than trying to push that rock off the top. And we're now going to follow the route that the English took on the 3rd of June 1900 to capture Pretoria. There we go. So this is Main Street in Bryanston, and it's going out towards the old racetrack and Kyalami, and you see that the cars are crossing a bridge. Now, on the 3rd of June 1900, Lord Roberts and his army of about 16,000 men crossed that area. It was actually a drift. There wasn't a bridge there at that point. So you've probably crossed that bridge many times without knowing that that was the main route of the British Army. And an appropriate CD to play in your car is Marching to Pretoria, because that's where it came from, is this great march to Pretoria that started at the Vaal River. And in the distance on the right-hand side, you'll see some buildings, and we'll take a closer look at those now. Okay, so that's called Leeuwkop. So you see that kopie there? It's supposed to resemble the back of a lion. And in 1890, President Kruger set this area aside and gave it to the Correctional and Prisons Department. And eventually, it was around about it took till 1924 before this farm prison was actually established. And it's 850 hectares, and the main produce now is pigs or pork. So there's 2,054 pigs kept there, of which 154 are breeding pigs. This prison houses 4,000 inmates, and one of the famous ones right at the moment is Rietfontein. Now, for a tourist guide, it can be very interesting to find out who actually was at this prison, especially if one goes back to the liberation struggle days. And it becomes a very interesting exercise in research. And as you can see from a 10-minute tour or ride through the Fourways Bryanston area, suddenly you have the potential to create a very interesting tour that's a full day. And we'll move on to the next one. So there's the sign, Santon Leeuwkop Prison Farm. Now, we, as a family, my father put up the second house in Grosvenor Road in Bryanston, and cows used to graze in our garden, and it was actually a blue gum plantation, and he spent many, many, many months pulling out a lot of blue gums and planting grass, and I'll tell you that shortly. But sometimes at night, you would hear this siren going off, and my father would get very flustered, and he would turn on the floodlights, and these were big lights we had at the corner of our house, and he would go and get his pistol, and he'd wander around the garden with his torch and pistol and his dressing gown. And I'd say, Dad, what's wrong? He'd say, no, there's been a breakout at Leeuwkop prison again. And so it was very real in those days. You know, we had very little protection, and we certainly didn't have the walls and the security that we have today. So that's just a childhood memory. And next I'm going to show you what it was like in Bryanston in 1958. Yeah, so that's me and my two sisters in our garden in Grosvenor Road. And you can see in the background there's just veld and blue gum trees. And my father's been planting grass and we've been helping him. And then we go to the next one. And you can see that being hauled into the veld by my father virtually every weekend. And if we didn't go looking for blockhouses, we'd go down the road to the Jukskei River for a picnic. And he would fish, and I would shoot at klipspringers with my Daisy #2 pellet gun. I mean, can you believe, you know, Bryanston has changed rather. But there I stand, I'm armed to the teeth, and with one of my early funny hats on, and no teeth, and armed to the teeth with my young sister, Lindy. Okay, so from Leeuwkop prison, with a long lens, under suspicious glances from the gate guards at the prison, there you can see a picture of how prominent the Lone Hill Koppie is in the area. And back into Cedar Road. Now we're going to go a little bit further down the road, and we're going to see an incredible place that is actually going to become a 30 billion rand investment. So we'll move on to Steyn City. Oh, sorry, before that, we're going to take a little deviation. And this is in Chartwell, just around the corner from the amazing Super Spa in Broad Acres. And it's just off 3rd Avenue, and it's easy walking distance from my house. There's this little cemetery, and it's got some very interesting graves in it. So we'll meet the first inmate of the cemetery now. Okay, so this is Wessel Hendrik Robertser, and he was born in June 1854, and he died on the 23rd of January 1900. And I've done some research. He died in the Anglo-Boer War. He was badly wounded in one of the actions that took place on the day before Spienkop. Spienkop was, of course, the 24th of January. And there he is, just buried. I mean, I didn't think we had anything Anglo-Boer War, apart from that boulder that nobody could push over. I didn't know that we had anything just on our doorstep. And this is walking distance from me. And then his headstone, which probably needs a bit of cleaning up, says that he was a big hero. So I'm going to do some further research to see what he did and who he was. I'm sure we're going to turn up something. And then we'll see his father now. So his father was a voortrekker. 1820, he was born in 1825. He died in 1894. And he probably owned most of the land here. And I did ask Professor Kathy Munro if she knew anything about him. And she said, no, we're going to post it on the Heritage portal, and we'll see who can help. Now, it's a very well fenced and looked after cemetery. It's got a brand new lock on the gate. And so now I need to try and find out who, in fact, is looking after the cemetery, because we still have some further research to do, and we'll see the next grave now. So this one we don't know. It's been pushed over or fallen over. So it's probably the wife of the original voortrekker Robertser. So I'm really looking forward to, under supervision obviously, and with the correct permission, just raising and maybe repairing the headstone, so that local people have something to look at. And of course, tourists, bring them along. I mean, I guess they didn't know there was a Voortrekker grave right next to Cedar Road. So here we move on to Steyn City. This is the western entrance, and it's really nice. And one wonders, why was it designed like this? And so I spoke to Dino Plumari. Now the Plumari family is implemental in the development of the place, and I said, who is the architect, and why the gate like this, and why have someone shooting an arrow on the top? So he told me that it's DBM Architects, and this area is 4 times the size of Monaco, Steyn City. It's 2.5 times the size of Central Park in New York. Okay, and it consists of 2,000 acres, and only 50% of that will be developed as residential. It also has an 18-hole Jack Nicklaus designed golf course, which is a par 72 for those who know what that means, a 7,000-meter course. It has 40 kilometers of pedestrian boulevards, and at the moment they're busy building 5,000 square meters of retail space. So that this is the 5.5 billion rand investments phase, which is going to bring the total investment in this estate up to 30 billion rand. I mean, that is amazing, and it's on our doorstep. So we'll have a look at the guy shooting the arrow now, the archer. So there he is. So I asked Dino, what does that represent? I mean, why an archer on the top? He said, no, Dou Steyn, the billionaire who developed the place and after whom it's named, he's actually said he was born under the star of Sagittarius, and that's why we have the archer on the top. So it's a simple explanation. So now we go down the road and we cross the Jukskei River, and just as you come up from the Jukskei River on the left, there's a business called with railway sleepers, and it's also a big sign there says Auction Pro. And here, if you go inside, this is now the furniture side, you'll see this fabulous collection of plates from railway engines. We'll have another sort of closer look, and you will see this investment in this collection. Now, before I got interested in this, I wondered what on earth all these numbers meant and all the symbols meant. And there's quite a science behind this. And when you get into it, it becomes very, very interesting. And on one of my tours, it was actually a free tour of the Kalkhevel battlefield for the local Kalkhevel residents. This young teenage girl sort of attached herself to me and my wife. Her name was Eleanor. And she seemed a bit odd, but she was very, very knowledgeable. And she said to me, Rob, do you like trains? And I said, yeah, I like trains. She said, what's your favorite engine? Oh, no, she said, what kind of train do you like? I said, what do you mean? She said, well, do you like British trains or American trains? I said, no, I like British trains. So she said, oh, what's your favorite engine? So I said, I only know one engine. I said, the Flying Scotsman. She said, oh, the Flying Scotsman. Yeah, that's got a double bogey, and it's this, and it's this, and it's got a Garrett this. And I mean, she just knew so much, and it just opened up a fascinating new world for me. And just for instance, when we go to the next slide, just to hone in on one of those, second from the bottom, on the bottom, second from the right, you'll see 2621 GCA, South African Railways. Now, that means it was a Garrett articulated steam locomotive, and articulated and simple. It's two different concepts. It's how the drivetrain works. So once one goes into the subject, it's very, very interesting. And this comes from one of 13 Garrett articulated steam locos that was imported in 1927. And the fact was the Krupp factory. So isn't that interesting? So So then Eleanor, as part of our conversation on the battlefield, she says, no, she loves trains. And she says, you know, they have about 12 steam engines, and they've got 2 trains her father's got, and sometimes she goes there and they've got their own private railway track. And then she says to her father, okay, I would like that particular locomotive attached to that particular train, and then we're going out together for a little ride. So her father organizes it, and by the next day, the boiler's all fired up and everything, and they go around. And I looked at Slava, my wife, and I said, yeah, right. And then Mike Myers, her father, he emailed me a thank you email afterwards. And then I see at the bottom of the email, he's actually the co-owner of Sandstone Estate. So actually, he does have about 12 locomotives and his own private railway track and 2 trains. So Eleanor wasn't telling a tall story. But a happy ending to that is that we feel that she has amazing talent. I think she does have, she is autistic, but she's very intelligent, and she does have the potential to being an absolutely amazing specialist tourist guide. So that's one of the happy stories that I'm going to share with you today. And then we're going to move on our little tour. And here we get back to this engraved monolith. Now, it's immensely old, and it's right next to the airport. And you can see the site is very overgrown, but you can see that this monolith has been deliberately shaped on the top. And I'll give you the review shortly. On the right-hand side, on the north of it, there's a sort of a semi-hollowed boulder. And then all around it, yeah, that's it. And all around it and in amongst all the rubbish, because the taxi drivers eat there and they throw papers there and everything, there's like a ring of rocks, which will be very, very interesting to map out, to see the meaning of this prehistoric site. But we'll move to the next one. And there you see it at a different angle. And the point I want to make here is that this monolith can perhaps be dated, and it's probably many thousands of years old. And you'll see it's got like a gray part, and then it's got a lighter brown part. And the lighter brown part is actually patina, which is built up. The original rock is actually a diabase. It's like a really, really hard granite, which is gray. And this has been submerged in water, or it's just pure weathering that has built up this layer. And so geologically, we can probably date right back from where this monolith was manufactured, if you like. And I'm quite amazed because, you know, how many monoliths do we have in this country? I know of quite a few, but very few people know about them. And to think we have one in Gauteng like this. I have 2 or 3 really nice ones in the Standerton area. So if you look at my YouTube channel, I've got a little documentary I did called The Mysteries of Mount Orion. And there you will see another couple of monoliths. And in the background of my one monolith, you'll actually see the ghost of the place, the protective ghost. And he appears in photographs, really, really quite intriguing. But have a look at that. So to have one in Gauteng is amazing. To have one in Lanseria is even more amazing. I mean, who ever would have thought that something like this, which is really prehistoric and probably has immense symbolism, and I'll get onto that now, is sitting right on our doorstep. So there we have another angle, and you can see on the right-hand side, you'll see the hollowed part, which maybe had offerings put in it on the north side. And you can see the angle of the top of that boulder or monolith has been cut very carefully, and it's actually an angle of exactly 45 degrees. And what I suspect, and the function of other monoliths, have been it's there to form a stellar function and a season marking function. So you'll probably find that this one points to a rising star during the summer solstice, and that could be Sirius. But that's why we have other specialist tour guides on board, like Terry Lever. And I'm going to drag Terry out there, and we're going to look at it together, and he's going to work out with his star charts exactly what it points to and why it might have been put there. An interesting thing. And there, on the small boulders, this one was one of the few ones that were actually exposed. You will see there's actually 4 mini cupule engravings. So to have a monolith and to have engravings, yes, associated with it is just quite mind-boggling, and that we find this in the year 2020 is even more interesting. This is the back or the northeastern side, and you'll see there's boulders very carefully placed in a semicircle. The monolith itself is behind the bushes in the top left-hand side of the photograph. So we have to clear the site, but we need to organize its protection first. I don't want to draw attention to it by clearing the site and working on it, and then people come and push rocks over and do all sorts of crazy things, maybe paint on the rocks, because we're almost in the official Cradle of Humankind here. And I think this is a very precious memorial from the distant past. There's another view of it, and just to show you in a different light. And these ancient monuments all have their moods. And I've been past this many times now, and every time I go around, it's got a different mood. It's got a brown mood. This is a grey mood. These are very holy sites, and they're very sacred sites. And if you look around, walking around it, there's a tremendous scatter of ancient stone tools around these rocks. But we move on, and we move again to the Anglo-Boer War or South African War. And many of you have traveled this road, and on the left-hand side is the home of the chicken pie. It's actually not the original home of the chicken pie. That was on the R511 many, many years ago. When I was a kid growing up, we used to go on a Sunday and buy those chicken pies. But this one is a place called Rietfontein, this crossing of the Crocodile River. And you spoke earlier about Lord Roberts with the main body of the British Army marching to Pretoria on the 3rd of June 1900. Well, in typical tactical fashion, on the left-hand side, on his left flank, General French was leading the whole cavalry, and they were riding 4,500 horsemen across there where you see that car on the bridge. It was adrift. And in the distance, you see the mountains or the hills. That's a farm called Kalkierville. And it's one of the main passes through the Rietfontein. And that's where General French was headed, hoping to outflank the Boer right flank, as he always did, to make General Roberts's passage much easier. And we wonder if there were chickens here. There probably was an old farmhouse, and maybe General French picked up a chicken here. We might see that later. So on we go, and many of you, as you crest the rise there, and you see in front of you these lovely hills, and in fact, just above that cabbage tree, there's a very unique geological feature. Yeah, in the Dolomites, it's actually a granite outcrop in the Dolomites. And little did General French know, but the headquarters of Commandant Liebenberg was up top there, and he was waiting for the British cavalry. There were about 140 Boers from the Groot Mariko Commando, and there was one of the other commandos, and there were only 4,500 British horsemen. The brave of them, approaching only 140 Boers when you're only 4,500. I say that quite sarcastically. But before we go into this Battle of Kalkievel and the new Lion Park, on the right-hand side is the Crocodile River. And hidden on the top of cliffs is a very, very precious treasure that nobody knows about. But one day we're going to make it tourable once all the protections are in place. And I'm going to show you something really unique that is prehistoric starting now. Aha, can you see these lovely paintings? You will see a figure on the top right. There we go, where you can see the red pointer. And on the left as well, there's almost a figure, almost in a cave. So these are San or Bushman paintings, which probably go back more than 2,500, 3,000 years. And there we have it on our doorstep, unknown, unseen. And we'll see some more of the figures now. Okay, you can see the lovely monochromes. On the top, those are the black ones. They've faded quite a bit. But the color pictures, I mean, just look at that eland. And those eland are typical subjects of the Bushmen who worshipped them. And they were always depicted as looking towards the setting sun with their heads down. And that was a symbol of death and rebirth. And then we'll see some more. Now, how's that? These monochromes. And it's like two parties coming together. And they're happy to see each other. They're not throwing things at each other. So it's a really peaceful place in the peaceful sea. If you think you can find it easily, you can't. You have to have a canoe in the river or a rubber vessel like I have, and then you have to get out of it and climb up in order to see these. And that's probably one of the reasons why it's been preserved and totally unknown. And it's also one of the reasons that Maria Louise dubs me as an explorer. But we'll move on to Kalkievel Battle. So we're now approaching Lesedi village, which is a really nice place to take tourists. And in this particular spot, T Battery of the Royal Horse Artillery managed to save the cavalry from total destruction. So as I drive down this road, I'm mentally going through the battle and just quite amazed at what happened. And here we have this lovely big road. In those days, there was just a little footpath next to the river. And it was certainly not a battle for cavalry. It was a battle for infantry, because as soon as you took a horse off that little track, you were in deep trouble, as you'll see as we go further down. So this photo is taken from the new Lion and Safari Park, and it's looking west, and you see these big hills there. Now, that's where the Boers were waiting for the British. And if they'd waited just a little bit longer, as is inevitably the case, they would have caused a lot more destruction. But the Dragoon Guards, the Carabineers, were ahead, the 6th Dragoons, and the Boers opened fire from a little bit further down the road towards Woederstroom. And the Carabineers just turned around and tried to gallop back. And this caused huge confusion, as you can imagine, with 4,500 horsemen, 3 batteries of Royal Field Artillery. So that's 18 guns coming down this narrow track, and you've got this whole army of cavalry coming down, moving north, and you've got the Carabineers and the Inniskillens trying to retreat and gallop backwards. So imagine the confusion, and imagine at a range of 700 meters what fun the British the Boer sharpsmen had on that force, and we'll see now. Yeah, so this must be the chicken that General French took from the home of the chicken pie on the way down to Kalkierville. But this is General French, a very short man, very, very brilliant general. And he perfected the outflanking of the Boer army time and time and time again. And he always took the left flank, the British left flank, the Boer right flank. And he had done that a week before at the Battle of Doornkop, where he took the Boer right flank at Doornkop, which is near Rietfontein, between Krugersdorp and Rietfontein. Interesting battlefield, I can take you there. Someone else who was there was Oates, okay, Titus Oates. And he was 6th Dragoon Guards, and he became famous on Scott's expedition because he was on the way back from the South Pole. He was holding back Scott's party because of a wound that he'd received during the Anglo-Boer War in the Northern Cape. I think it might just be the Cape, near Aberdeen, and that was slowing them down. So very famously, on the 17th of March 1912, which was his 32nd birthday, he left the tent and he never came back. So he had said, I'm just going outside and maybe some time. And if we just go back one slide, you know, of all the regiments, there are 21 regiments of cavalry of the line. There are 3 regiments of household cavalry. In the British infantry, there are 109 infantry regiments. And every one of those regiments has a special battle day that they celebrate. But only one celebrates a person, and that's the 6th Dragoon Guards. And they celebrate on the 17th of March every year, Oates's Day. Now we go on to Allenby. Another famous man who was there was Colonel Allenby at the time. You'll see there he is marching in on foot into Jerusalem. And he took Jerusalem on the 11th of December 1917. But he was one of the men, one of the officers who steadied the British retreat at Kalkierville and saved the situation. He was actually with the 6th Inniskillen Dragoons. And I love to trace what happened to these guys. You know, did they become great, or did they go into obscurity in later life? Well, he became a very, very great general. And you'll see the next one. This is now the New South Wales Lancers. And I had some Australian tourists, one of whom had served with the Royal New South Wales Lancers. And that's exactly how they still dress. It's a Sydney-based regiment, which is now not cavalry, because now it's, you know, cavalry became tank units, essentially. But these guys dress the part, you know, and if you look at those hats that they wear, those cavalry hats, everything has to be at a particular angle. It has to be 4 fingers above your left eye, and it has to be this, and your chin strap has to be under your chin and not under your there by your neck, you know, under your jaw. Everything has to be exact. So this was what Major Lee was dressed like. This is a sergeant that we see in front there, but he was one of the men who stopped the retreat, and he ordered the cavalrymen to hide behind their horses. And you know that there was over 1,200 horses killed there, but remarkably, there were only 5 British casualties. There were 2 killed outright, 1 died of wounds, and 2 were missing in action. So I think the Boers also were pretty worried because, you know, a decision had already been made in May that no one told the British, was that Pretoria would not be defended. And so they probably had this in mind, and they thought there would be peace after Pretoria fell, and they thought they might be tried for atrocities because it really was like a turkey shoot at the Battle of Kalkierville. So this was Major Lee, and he rose up through the ranks, and he became one of the most senior officers in the Australian Army, and he became ADC to the Governor General of Australia. And my New South Wales Lancer tourist, he didn't know the story, and neither did the regiment. So they made me a present of a New South Wales Lancer's genuine hat with the puggaree and the badge and the feather. I'll remember what kind of feather it is a little later. But they also said to me, you know, Rob, and I mean, this gift must have cost them a lot of money, because you just can't get these kind of hats outside of the regiment. And they said, Rob, there's only one condition, and that is if we ever see you in a photograph exploring or on a tour and you're not wearing your New South Wales Lancers hat, then you're in deep trouble. So now I have to wear this hat wherever I go, instead of my normal comfortable leather Boer hat. We'll move on. Okay, so on the western side, there is still, you can see this is a mule track, which was built by the Royal Engineers 120 years ago. Still almost in perfect condition. And this is what was used to take supplies up to the garrison on the western side. This became a very important strategic point because it was one of the few passes in the Witwatersrand on the way to Magaliesburg from Krugersdorp and Johannesburg. Well, Krugersdorp was more important strategically from a military point of view than Johannesburg. And so you can probably follow this track for about 6-7 kilometers up to the top, and I'll show you what's on top. And this is on the western side of the Lion Park. So I'll show you, if you want to do my adventure tour and hike, this is what the Lion Park looks like.
So this is the list, choosing the symbols, also the list that you've got on certain, but it's not the ideal for us.
Okay, sorry, I think we've got some mixed, I'm hearing something else. But anyway, this is from the Boer position, looking down at the Lion Park. And near the buildings, just to the upper right of the buildings, is a big hollow. And that's where most of the 4,500 cavalrymen were trapped. And I'll take you down into that hollow now. This is some of the fortifications that are on top of the western side. This is an emplacement for a pom-pom, and it's looking northwest, and you can see the Magaliesburg in the far right-hand corner in the distance. Still absolutely perfect condition, and you can see my legendary walking stick standing there where the gun barrel would have been. And it's difficult to show you, but behind the gun barrel, yeah, you almost had it there, is a pit. So that is really for the trace of the pom-pom. And we're going to see some other ruins up at the top there. Okay, now we're down in the hollow, and you stream. This is the Wetlands restaurant at Kalkierville. This is right on the battlefield. And you're actually right next to the hollow, and that's the little stream, lovely clear water. And you can just imagine a narrow little track next to the stream, and there you can see in the distance the ridge from which the Boers were firing straight into the British, who were lying behind their horses in this very place. And we'll see another view of the stream now. There we go. So there's the lovely clear stream. And so next time we go to the Lion and Safari Park, just imagine 4,500 horsemen and some artillerymen pinned down behind the dead horses. and they were pinned down all night. Sometime late at night, the Boers retreated towards Bryanston, but the British didn't know that. And then just in conclusion, another fantastic discovery. This is very, very unique, and I'm not going to reveal where it is, but it's within the Cradle of Humankind. It has to be protected. This is unique because how many ringing rocks do you know of? Now, a ringing rock or a gong rock issues a special note or notes if you strike it with a rock or a piece of wood. And you'll see that this one has been carefully, the underside has been hollowed. There's a hollow, possibly for tone, right on the top of this rock which has been placed on the boulder. And in fact, there's a carving that's not clear from this photograph, which is of a crocodile's head. And if you strike the top rock, it issues, I think, 4 or 5 different tones. And but if you strike the rock on which it rests, there's no tone whatsoever. And what makes it unique, we'll go to the next slide, is that it's actually propped up in place by an ancient stone tool on the left-hand side. And in the next picture, you'll see it more clearly. And there you can see it on the bottom. Yeah, you got it, Maria Louise. So that is actually a Middle Stone Age hand axe. So Middle Stone Age was 25,000 years ago to about 200,000 years ago. So let's take a little bit of an average, and let's say that this particular site was made, and the top boulder was carefully laid there and positioned to produce this ton, and it must weigh tons and tons. And it was positioned using this hand axe from the Middle Stone Age. So let's say that this site was made 100,000 years ago. And just one last slide in conclusion. This is on that site, and this is one of my fellow guides, Rika Scroenewald, who's probably on the chat show now. And you know, the point I want to make here is that, you know, we help each other. I mean, this is how we have to be as a guiding community now. We've all suffered, but I know we're jealous of our roots and our areas of expertise, but this is a partnership amongst many disciplines, and people like Howard Geach, who's an expert in geology and paleoanthropology, Rikus, who's an expert in wildlife and trees and ants and all sorts of things, myself, battlefields, archaeology. You know, we've all got to share and get together, because this is how we're going to kickstart things again. We have to be one and help each other. And now Maria Louise is going to play you sounds that were last heard 100,000 years ago.
That's amazing.
It's got like a crocodile face.
Yeah.
Mark, yes, I can even see, yeah, can you see the face coming down of the crocodile?
It's been,
yes.
It's been sculpted.
That's the face. That's the face of the crocodile.
See? And this basin has been hollowed.
And Rob, now just go on the normal rock. Unbelievable.
Okay, now it's really over to Maria Louise, who will be the sort of facilitator for questions.
Yeah, well, everybody, thank you, Rob. That was very interesting. Yeah, I'm sure we would love to go and explore with you someday. Is there anybody who wants to ask a specific question? You can switch on your mics now, or do you want to type your question on the public chat? It's to the left of your screens. Okay, Jackie is asking if you can see the monolith from the road to the airport.
No, sorry, I was just typing incorrectly. Jackie, if you've got very good eyes like me and you know where to look, you can see it, but it's probably half a kilometer from the main road, from the R512. But I'm not going to say any further, because if you turn off to the airport, you probably will see it quite easily.
Brenda's asking, how many ringing rocks do you think are in South Africa?
Okay, well, personally, I've found two on the Nooitgedacht battlefield. I found two at Green Hill, and that is where the Boers were entrenched during the Battle of Nooitgedacht. So I've got a ringing rock there, and it's got about 8 different sounds to it. There's one I know of in Nelspruit that I was shown by a friend. The other one I have is in the Kralingstad area in the old southern Transvaal. It's now Mpumalanga. And that's a very interesting one, because it has 3 different notes to it. And each one of those notes is demarcated by an engraving. And it's a really mysterious engraved symbol. And each one of those 3 symbols is different. And it looks like a kind of ancient Ogham, or it could even be ancient Phoenician. And I think that is what explaining what notes those are. So that's really a fascinating part.
Okay, Jolene commented that there's a dong in the Northern Cape as well. Where is it, Jolene? Do you have an idea? She's still typing. It's apparently near Kimberley. Do you know about it, Rob?
No, I don't. No, but there are some really interesting sites in the Karoo, and I'm just thinking of Cyril Kromnik, who wrote a book called Indo-Africa, and he was the one actually who showed me 35 years ago about engraved monoliths, and monoliths that were actually put up at an ancient site to indicate something else. And on this particular site, where we have this gong rock, I found another monolith which has been carved on the top to represent the mountain in the distance. So that's very significant and very interesting. And it's not something that professional archaeologists are good at picking up. So that's another, fresh angle to this site. And we are going to make it accessible and tourable, but obviously being within the cradle, we have to protect it first, because you're always going to get some idiot who comes to the ringing rock and decides to push it off the boulder. People are just crazy. So we have to protect first before we can make it tourable.
Okay, Brenda is typing another question. What were these gong rocks used for? What is the significance of these beautiful treasures?
Okay, to maybe pass messages as a communication, to use them, you've seen these sand rhythmic dances, maybe to keep time for the dancers. And we're only really scratching the surface now about these ancient civilizations and what they were capable of. Now, I have another site where I have a lot of white quartz rocks, which are not being mined. They're just beaten, and they're beaten flat. Well, not flat, but to a shiny position where they've lost all the patina. And they're in strategic places. And suddenly I realized what the function is, and none of them are ringing rocks. But if you beat a big piece of quartz against this at night, it actually creates light, a flash of light. And we call that phenomena thermoluminescence. So, these ancient people, they used rocks because basically that's really, they didn't have much else. It was their livelihood, their implements, their arrowheads, their entertainment. So yes, I would say communication and entertainment. That was the purpose of the ringing rock.
Okay, Jolene is typing another question or comment.
Okay.
I'm just waiting for her. Jolene's got a picture of a dong rock. How do I share it? Okay, Jolene, I'll make you presenter and you can just upload it. Hopefully you will manage.
That would be great. I'd really like to see it.
So just keep on talking, Rob. Let's see if I
Okay,
can get Coach Jolene to use this. Yeah.
Okay, so I was just talking about this book, Indo-Africa, by my friend Cyril Kromnik. He has a magnificent site in the Karoo somewhere. I forget the name of it. But he takes people there, and it's one of those sites which has an alignment with the stars. And he claims it's an ancient Indian site. And he actually takes you around there, and I think it's during the solstice, you can actually see what the site was designed around in very, very, very ancient times. And so we're full of these hidden treasures in this country. If you look at my YouTube video on Mount Orion and the mysteries of Mount Orion, I discovered 3 monoliths, all of which are engraved, and they're huge. And you cannot see one monolith from the other. And now we're talking a distance of 2.5 kilometers. And if you map these monoliths, you find that to the centimeter, it mirrors the Orion, in the Orion constellation, the 3 belt stars of Orion. So how interesting is that, where you have, Robert Duvall and Graham Hancock worked a lot on they called it the Orion mystery, where they found that the 3 great pyramids at Giza were aligned precisely with Orion's belt 9,500 years ago. Now, I have found 4 such similar alignments, and they are exact in South Africa. And each one of those has a special code to it. And one of those alignments is actually in the southern Transvaal near Grindstone. And even though you cannot see one monolith from the other, when you map them, they are exactly in alignment. It's absolutely phenomenal. And yeah, I've been promising to write that book. It's called Beyond Orion, because I actually, through my deep study and field work in the form of ancient rock engravings, I actually discovered why they were done. And this is a question that Graham Hancock and Duvall could not answer. And I know Graham Hancock quite well. I've met him and we've exchanged views. So one of these days, if I could just get off the Anglo-Boer War, I'll publish that book, Beyond Orion. I promised it as a wedding present when I married Slava, and that was like 18 years ago. It's not written yet. So there are a lot of things that we just are not aware of, that we don't know, and just get out there. I mean, I worked for quite a few years for a timber and boards company, and Peter always used to say to me, Rob, when you choose a company car, why do you choose a Honda or something like that? Why don't you choose a 4x4? Because you're always out in the veld. And I made a very good point to him, and I said, Peter, that's how I find things, is that I walk. I park my car and I walk. Oh, lovely. There we have this lovely gong rock. Okay, so in the Natal Midlands, this group, and they don't want it shared at the moment, but they've discovered a number of gong rocks as well in the Moy River area. So we're also going to make that tourable in the future once we've protected it. But how nice is that? And I can almost see on the right-hand boulder that there are faint engravings. We call them petroglyphs. On the left-hand boulder, sorry, left hand, I can see, but you know, I have this trained eye just on the boulder, a bit further to the right, on the boulder, yep, down a bit, yeah, I can see faint tracings there, faint engravings. So, gee, I'd love to see a close-up photograph of those. I'm convinced they're engravings. And I can see that this has also been carefully placed, this boulder. It's probably balanced on top of another rock, and the rock on the right has been shaped almost like a little amphitheater to magnify the sound.
Yeah, Jolene is saying that we should look at the white, where obviously many hands hit.
Yes.
As well as she is confirming that there are numerous engravings here.
Yes.
And she'll send some pics later. Maybe I'll just put it in the chat room so you can people can come and view it afterwards. They can revisit the video or your presentation, as well as, you know, view some of Jolene's photographs. We'll post it in the chat room.
Okay, then I'll post some more ringing rocks, and I will post the one in the Cradlingstad area that has those mysterious symbols carved above each note, where you sound each note. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
While Brenda is typing.
Okay, so she's asking about love to see the blockhouses in the area. Now, just down the road, there's a blockhouse called Barton's Folly. The reason it's called that is that it was erected by General Barton, who was overall in charge of the Krugersdorp area, which included Hekpoort, where this blockhouse is situated. And it's called a folly because it's a double-story blockhouse, but it was never used, because after they built it, they discovered that they built it too high, too close to overlooking hills and koppies, so that you could easily just shoot into the blockhouse from the koppies. So it was called Barton's Folly. There was also hardly any water nearby, so it was virtually indefensible. There are a lot of blockhouses in the area. I can show you 3 different ones in Bryanston, which you probably have ridden past on the way to Hartbeespoort Dam and never noticed. There's a beautiful one in Krugersdorp, Monument Township. It's called Fort Harlech, and it's a double-story blockhouse, very, very interesting and well preserved. And it's got 2 bastions built onto it, which are interesting because, you know, the Boers were not supposed to attack blockhouses, and they used to rush the blockhouses and then put their rifles through the firing loops and cause havoc and get the garrison to surrender. So they had to build these 2 bastions so that they could cover the approaches to the blockhouse. So the Boers couldn't do that.